All right. I'm making a jar. It's a lidded container, and this particular jar is good to learn how to make because a lot of teapots will use this type of body and lid configuration. So with this lid, there's this inner part, this wall. We call that a flange. And what's nice about a flange lid on a teapot is that this weight on that lower part of the lid brings the center of gravity of the lid down, which will make it harder for the lid to fall off when you go to pour. So that's the idea. You've seen lids where it requires you to keep one hand on the lid as you pour. So the further down this flange comes, the less likely the lid is going to fall off because the center of gravity being lowered even further. Okay, whenever making any type of pot that has a body and a lid, I want to make sure that the mound of clay that I'm using for the body is also being used to make the lid. And I like to keep enough clay set aside for a couple of lids just in case maybe I'm trimming the first lid, I wreck it, or I don't like the look of the first lid that I'm working with. I have the second one to fall back on. If you make the lid from clay from a different bag than the body, the chances are that the lid's not going to fit properly because the water content could be slightly different between the two bags of clay, and that's going to affect shrinkage and therefore affect fit. So the body of this is very simple. It could be a cylinder, it could be a vase shape. And we don't really have to make any special considerations of with the rim on this, whereas we had to for some of the other jars. Your clay shrinks around 12 to 15% from wet to glaze fired, especially if you're doing high fire. And so if there's a particular size jar or teapot you're after, you want to make sure that it's scaled up to compensate for the shrinkage. It's going to be a pretty large teapot, but that'll be fine. I like to brew herbal tea that I then refrigerate. Makes great iced tea. So it's nice to have a good amount. It's pretty thin. Some individuals like to be able to get their hand inside the teapot for cleaning, but then it makes for a pretty wide mouth. So then it means you're going to have a fairly good size lid. So you need to decide on the aesthetics, but also on functionality. Okay, with calipers, this distance is the same as this distance, although it may not appear to be that way. I'll use this end to measure the inside diameter of the rim. All right. And you always want to throw the lid immediately after throwing the body. what's really important is to take that measurement right after you've thrown the body. And if you have to hold off on making the lid, you keep the spare clay for the lids covered very well in plastic so that they're not drying at all, and take note of that exact diameter that you've measured, and then you should be fine. Okay, so that's the body. Make sure I have enough clay. I'd rather have too much clay than not enough. The excess clay I can always remove. And I think I have enough clay here that I can leave the floor quite thick so that I can, when the lid's rather hard, I can trim to create a knob or handle. Whenever you have a really thick floor, you need to spend extra time compressing the floor. Otherwise, it's apt to crack on you. So I keep checking with the calipers to make sure that I'm, I'd say the thickness of the rim right here is out from the measurement of the calipers. So I'm trying to visually place where I think the flange will need to be placed. And I'm going to use my finger to start jabbing into the clay, which will create an inner wall. And I'll start further out than where the caliper is measuring. Okay? And I'm going to angle that way so it will get narrower and narrower. See how that's done? Okay, so I'll use this end. The two ends, the distance is the same. Continue. Okay. There. So what I'm wanting is the calipers to be able to touch all the way down to the bottom, because that's where ultimately that's where the lid is going to be making its final contact on the teapot body and resting there. You don't want to measure this part to have the caliper measurement be what this is and then this be wider, because then what's going to happen is that the lid is going to get jammed. It's going to end up touching the teapot here and not be able to slide further down. And also to help prevent that jamming that I was talking about, I like to taper this top part. All right. Remember, the taller this is, the lower the center of gravity will be when the lid is on the pot, and that's going to reduce the likelihood of the lid falling off when you go to pour. So that's good. We'll clean this up a little bit. This overhang, that's something that you can choose to have on your teapot. See, I have that here. Okay, or you could choose to not have that. You definitely need some clay on the lid to be sitting on this edge, this rim. Otherwise, the lid will just fall through. But you don't have to have that much hangover beyond that. You can always leave it, and then when you go to trim it, you can keep trimming it until you have it how you want. It's more of an aesthetic consideration. Something that you have to decide now, though, is the angle that you want this to be. Do you want it to be steeper or shallower? You also need to consider the angle of the shoulder on the teapot body too. So, and maybe some of that can be trimmed to get exactly the way you want it once everything is leather hard. Okay, and the floor is really thick, so that can be trimmed away. To leave a knob, I think we're good.